Hare Krishna, and welcome to the beginning of the Nectar of Instruction, Jai, by Srila Rupa Goswami. It was written as the Upadeshamrita, which is Sanskrit for the Nectar of Instruction. It's a literal translation. And it's translated by and commented on by Srila Prabhupada, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada. We're going to be going through his purports, and I'm so excited. We're going to go through this book together for those live and also those following the recording. So, as you all know, I'm Shami Prastas, and organizing this is Kishori Gopi Devi Dasi, formerly known as Kelly. Now formally a member of the same parampara coming from Lord Chaitanya through Rupa Goswami and Srila Prabhupada. And so yeah, hello to everybody. Hare Krishna. A little bit about this course, and we'll just kind of today's like not going to be a full kind of class in the same sense. I mean, the first thing is it's not going to be exactly the same as the Bhagavad Gita. It's going to be a little bit less philosophy and more application, because the Nectar of Instruction is all about how to practice bhakti. It's a handbook. It's actually really short. It's only 11 verses. If you just chant the Sanskrit, it'll take you like 3 minutes to chant it, maybe 2.5 if you're fast. But one of the meanings of nectar is that everything is condensed, right? Like it's like concentrated cream. It's all the essential instructions on how to practice bhakti, and that's been unpacked in these purports. And actually, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, one of our great acharyas, he's given commentary on Nectar of Instruction. Many great devotees have spoken on it, and we're going to have a lot of like reflection on, okay, how do I apply this principle in my life? What does it look like in today's world? What does this mean for me? How can I do this in my world or in my? So a lot of reflection, questions, and answers. So after each class, there's a WhatsApp group, and of course, we'll ask everyone to reflect back one thing. But we're also going to have some prompt. I'm going to give a prompt for everyone to specifically not just what stood out. That's going to be there too, but also like answering. For example, how did you apply? What do you think of this principle, or how can you apply this principle we talked about in class in your life? Give some application, a lot of application questions, and it's kind of like homework, and you'll have all week to do it. But the sooner the better, because it's actually incredible how the application of other people is really applicable for ourselves. I'm super looking forward to it because it's going to enrich all of your experiences. Again, is going to enrich my practice and realization. But I know it's going to happen for all of you too. So that's a little bit about the format. And the first class, this is going to be a lot of like introducing Rupa Goswami, what even is this book, and going over like the foreword. We might touch in the beginning of the first verse. We won't get very far. But let's, I guess I'll just start with Kirtan, and then we can have a little bit of, I think we all know each other. There's not actually any new people here. Yeah. So I don't know if it's really necessary to take your reasons for being here, unless someone feels specifically inspired, like how you feel about exactly taking this course or going into Nectar of Instruction. We can open that up, but lead a little kirtan. I'll lead this kirtan.
Put the musicians' audio on.
Yeah. Okay. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Everybody. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Srivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Jaya Gaura Nitai, Gaura Nitai, Gaura Nitai, Jaya Gaura Nitai, Gaura Nitai, Gaura Nitai, Gaura Nitai, Jaya Gaura, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jai, Srila Prabhupada ki Jai, Nectar of Instruction, Srila Rupa Goswami ki Jai. As always, we'll start with some pranam mantras. Yeah, Mr. Saw, you're off. Om Jnana Timirantasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuraniritang Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vancha Kalpatarupyascha Kripa Santupya Evacha Patitana Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschati Deshatarane Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuttapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavangscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitang Tang Sajivam Sadvaitam Savatutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitangscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Haribol. All right. So I think everyone here was part of the Bhagavad Gita course. So it's great to see you all again. There may be new people listening to the recording. And if so, we'd love to have an introduction if and when you can tune in live. And if not, then on the WhatsApp, because we want to hear about your story, how you heard about us, how you heard about this book and why you want to study it. Does anyone feel called to speak a little bit about your motivation or what's happening for you around taking this course, around the Nectar of Instruction? I think some of us actually just came back from India and actually got to spend some time around Rupa Goswami's Samadhi and Bhajan Kutir, where he is laid to rest, and also where he practiced and wrote many of these books, respectively, in Vrindavan. So that's even more alive. Would anybody like to speak to anything around that, or any introductions before we start? Okay, I'll just say that it's a huge privilege and pleasure to read the Nectar of Instruction with a group of people who are enthusiastic about it. It's one of my favorite books. And I'm going to start by talking a little bit about Rupa Goswami and why he's so amazing. In this movement, actually, we're known as Rupanugas, which means the followers of Rupa, because he is considered to be so important.
Will you spell that?
Sure. So Rupa is R-U-P-A, Goswami, G-O-S-W-A-M-I. The definition of a Goswami is going to be given in this book, one who can control their senses. We'll be looking at that. But we're Rupanugas, we're followers of Rupa. And after Lord Chaitanya inaugurated the Bhakti revival of the planet, started in India and it spread around the world, some 550 or so years ago, or yeah, approximately. He empowered his followers to systematize the philosophy, to write and print and distribute books, and to reestablish the places of pastimes of Krishna, including many of the places that our group went to on this pilgrimage we just came back from. So those 6 Goswamis are mentioned in the preface. I'm going to read from the preface of Srila Prabhupada, and they're Rupa, Sanatana, Raghunath Bhatta, Raghunath Dasa, Jiva Goswami, and Gopala Bhatta. These 6 personalities who've written a tremendous amount, were extremely advanced spiritually, and were direct disciples of Lord Chaitanya himself. So in the preface...
Before we start there, may I ask a question?
Sure, of course.
Who's on the cover?
Who's on the cover? Show me the book. So this most recent printing, we see 2 personalities. This is Rupa and Sanatana Goswamis. Rupa and Sanatana are considered the two eldest of the Goswamis. Sanatana is actually the elder brother, and Rupa Goswami. I don't know which one is which. One is writing and one is reading, and it's a representation of them. There are also pictures on the inside. Srila Prabhupada, Panchtattva. This is a temple that Rupa Goswami established to Radha Govinda in Vrindavan. That's still there. So forth. No. These are his deities. Radha Govinda ji. But we actually owe everything to the six Goswamis. And Srila Prabhupada studied their books scrutinizingly and translated them and helped them become really practical and applicable. So we're so grateful. Without that, we would have no access. So from the preface, Srila Prabhupada writes, the Krishna consciousness movement is conducted under the supervision of Srila Rupa Goswami. Pretty serious statement. It's under his supervision. That's how it's going. The Gaudiya Vaishnavas or Bengali Vaishnavas are mostly followers of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, of whom the six Goswamis of Vrindavan are direct disciples. Therefore, Narottam Das Thakur has sung, when I am eager to understand the literature given by the Goswamis, then I shall be able to understand the transcendental loving affairs of Radha and Krishna. So the writings of the Goswamis are actually the maps. They're the maps on how to practice bhakti. They help us understand who we are, who is the Lord, what is the nature of this world, how to practice in relationship to the Lord, and what the goal is. And they give so many different signposts. It's just like a good map, right? When you're driving, you want to know how many miles or kilometers, if you're Canadian or Indian, there are to your destination. And you want to know what's happening between here and there. Is there traffic? Are there shortcuts? Are there diversions? What can you expect? Is the road quality lower? Do you have to slow down? These are the kinds of things you have to deal with when you're driving a car. Now, life is even more complicated. The human body is a very, very finely tuned vehicle designed for going back to Godhead. That's what it's designed for. You can also use it for other things, but it's actually a very special vehicle that can let you transcend the material world and access the spiritual. And the maps of the Goswamis or any great devotees in any lineage are the personal examples and the writings by which followers can go on the same journey that they went on. And that, in my opinion, and the opinion of many, even academics who are not even necessarily devotees in this movement, is one of the major distinguishing features of the Krishna consciousness movement, of the Hare Krishna movement or Gaudiya Vaishnavism, is that we have very clear, very systematic, and very recent, uncorrupted maps with a very systematic series of personalities who have followed those maps, added to them, added color, added maybe they put a little relief map, maybe they put like a topography or a heat map, maybe they translate it to another language, and they've also exemplified it. And that continues today in the living examples of many. So that's extremely powerful, because as we heard in the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, in the course of time, even the most beautiful knowledge can appear to be lost. So we're thinking about this. This is our meditation going to Nectar of Instruction. 500 very short years ago, Lord Chaitanya walked the earth, and Rupa Goswami met him and had a conversation that was recorded in one chapter of a book called the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And he was forever changed. And he wrote a series of books, including this one. And his followers have applied that in their lives and written and shared and translated. And now here we are receiving, just like somebody at the bottom of a tree. At the top of the tree is this perfect fruit. Someone plucks it, hands it down, and at the end, you receive it. If you just drop it, it'll hit the ground and it's spoiled. It's all gone. But when it's passed down hand to hand, then you can get it and drink it, that juice. So Rupa Goswami, very important. Prabhupada continues, therefore, to understand the mission of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and follow in his footsteps, one must very seriously follow in the footsteps of the 6 Goswamis, Sri Rupa, Sanatana, Bhakta Rakhunath, Sri Jiva, Gopal Bhakta, and Das Rakhunath. Sri Rupa Goswami was the leader of all the Goswamis. And to guide our activities, he gave us this Upadeshamrita, the Nectar of Instruction, to follow. So actually, Lord Chaitanya only wrote one thing. Does anybody know what that one thing is? The Sri Shikshastakam. He wrote 8 instructions on the holy name. It's a beautiful song about the holy name of Krishna. That's all he wrote. Everything else he spoke, and he asked his followers to systematize it, because one of the problems with establishing something powerful and meaningful in the world is that it's very quickly misunderstood or exploited or abused or forgotten. So to systematically present something means to show what it is and what it isn't, right? I mean, like Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita has been venerated, absolutely venerated in India for thousands of years. And even in the West, it's been very widely appreciated for at least 250 to 300 years. The Germans and English were very fond of the Sanskrit language, and when they saw Bhagavad Gita, they were blown away by it. But only when it was actually presented as it is did people start to really change, really start to apply Krishna's message in their own lives, could they actually start to see meaningful change. And so there's this importance of systematically, clearly, and without any ulterior motive, presenting and representing things over and over again. That's what we're doing today. We're doing in 2024 what Rupa Goswami wants us to do. So we can meditate on this, that he's very happy that after sitting in a hut and thinking how he can help people in the world, the Nectar of Instruction is distributed in like 40 languages and discussed very carefully. People are trying to apply it. So Prabhupada continues. In all spiritual affairs, one's first duty is to control his mind and senses. Unless one controls his mind and senses, one cannot make any advancement in spiritual life. One must promote themselves to the platform of goodness, Sattva-guna, by following the instructions of Rupa Goswami, and then everything concerning how to make further progress will be revealed. And then there's a very powerful statement, one of my favorite things I've ever seen in any book by Srila Prabhupada, and therefore in any book ever, and I'll share it. It's one sentence long. Anyone else want to know what it is? One sentence. It's like 10 words. Here it is. Advancement in Krishna consciousness depends on the attitude of the follower. Advancement in Krishna consciousness depends on the attitude of the follower. 11 words. 11 words long. That's a sutra you can take with you for the rest of your life. Advancement in Krishna consciousness depends on the attitude of the follower. And there's no substitute for that. There's nothing you can do to substitute for your own attitude. Nothing can take its place. Nothing in Krishna's mercy, nothing in the world will take the place of your own agency. Whatever tiny control we have over our attitude is all we have. And that's what Krishna consciousness depends on. Because Krishna's mercy is always there. And if you're hearing this, if you're this far, you already have access to the literature. You have access to the greatest treasure trove. You already kind of know everything. But advancement is due to our attitude. And so in many ways, bhakti is a constant process of checking and rechecking our attitude. You know, like attitude is, one of the meanings of it is how you're oriented to something. Like, you know, you have altitude, you have attitude. It's like your angle in relationship to something. So the idea is that the goal, the object doesn't change, but we're always changing. Just like when you drive a car or you fly a plane or anything else, you never drive in a straight line. It's not possible. You can try to drive in a straight line, but actually all you're doing is adjusting and readjusting over and over again. That's all it is. You know, when you fly a plane, there's wind, there's little pockets of lower resistance. You got birds doing this, you got all kinds of stuff happening around you. And so you can't go in a straight line. You just check, you check your bearings like every few seconds and you recenter. You check your attitude, your altitude, you check your rotation, all that to make sure that you can come back to it. So this book is all about what those checks are. What are the signposts? How do I know if I'm going off course? What do I do to get back on course? What's a symptom of advancement? What's a symptom of degradation? Right? And those are the kinds of things we need to know about because we are constantly adjusting. If you're not adjusting, you're not doing it right because we're not perfect. How do you share a process to help people become, to aim at perfection when they're not perfect? you have to include ways for them to understand and adjust. So that's what a lot of this book is about. It's adjustments, especially I would say the first 3 verses are entirely about that. And the next 4 verses are in many ways about that. And that's mostly what the book is about for us. The last 4 verses are much more esoteric and they're about the goal. And we will touch on that. But the really like applicable stuff is in the first few verses. First 8 especially. So the attitude of the practitioner.
Shamia, can I ask a question real quick?
Absolutely.
And hi, both Prabhus. I'm sorry if I missed this in the beginning, but 2 questions. Chaitanya and the 6 Goswamis, they were contemporaries?
Yes, they were.
Okay.
Lord Chaitanya appeared on the planet in 1486. And let's see. So he took sannyas at the age of 24. That's 1510. He left Bengal and went to Jagannath Puri and then traveled around India. He met Rupa and Sanatana Goswami a couple of years into that. They were basically contemporaries of his. The youngest of the Goswamis, Jiva Goswami, met Lord Chaitanya when Jiva was a young boy. He's the nephew of Rupa and Sanatana. Okay. He's the youngest of the Goswamis. So the age range is like from a little bit older than Lord Chaitanya to a couple of decades younger.
Okay. And then my other question, you kind of just said, Chaitanya was born in Mayapur?
That's right.
And then he left there when he was 12.
Or 24.
Or 24 when he took sannyas.
That's
and
right.
Then that's when he goes to Vrindavan and.
Yeah, he goes several places. He was based
and he meets the I'm sorry, I know you just said this too. He meets the Goswamis in Vrindavan, or he knew them from his hometown.
He meets Rupa Goswami in Ramakeli, which is not Vrindavan. He met Sanatana Goswami in, I believe, Varanasi. Don't quote me on that, but it's a detail. But the point is, those conversations he had with them and the specifics, the context around them are given in a book called the Chaitanya Charitamrita, which is Lord Chaitanya's biography. By Krishnadas Kaviraj, who himself learned from the 6 Goswamis and lived in Vrindavan. Lord Chaitanya went to Vrindavan once. He took a tour of Vrindavan and he went back to Jagannath Puri. He didn't actually spend that much time in Vrindavan, but he authorized the Goswamis to establish the places of pastimes there. For example, Lord Chaitanya refound Radhakund, Shamakund, and he ordered Rupa and Sanatana and others to establish it as a place of pilgrimage, to write about it and its importance, which we'll get to in this book actually at the very end. So that's what the Goswamis did. In terms of time, Rupa Goswami spent just a few weeks with Lord Chaitanya. I have to go back and check. I think it was about a month with Lord Chaitanya. Sanatana Goswami a little bit more. But they deeply imbibed his mood. And they spent the rest of their lives presenting and representing on that and conversing with each other and encouraging. And they were the nexus, the core of the expanding bhakti movement.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up question to that.
Mm-hmm.
If we're talking about the Goswamis as contemporaries of Chaitanya, I don't immediately recognize any in the parampara. Is there like is that just a section of other practicing Krishna consciousness, or are there any from these Goswamis, or like they just grouped with Chaitanya?
Do you mean, do they have any direct disciples?
Yeah.
They did.
And maybe do the distinction of the Panchatattva and the 6 Goswamis.
Right. Well, Lord Chaitanya, we hear in this mantra, Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar, Srivas, Adi Gaur Bhaktivinoda. So these 5 persons, Chaitanya, Nityananda, Advaita, Gadadhar, and Srivas, were contemporaries, and their lives and pastimes are given in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Lord Chaitanya is the chief. He's actually Krishna again in this yuga, in this age. And the 6 Goswamis, basically contemporaries, but kind of a little bit younger than them. Some of them did have direct disciples, some did not. If you look at the list of the parampara or lineage of gurus and the initiating gurus at the beginning of Bhagavad Gita, it's not an exhaustive list. It's like 1 or 2 people per generation. It's not that there's only 1 or 2 people per generation who are qualified or function as initiating gurus. It's that the paper isn't big enough. But they're preeminent gurus, right? So it's absolutely the case that Rupa Goswami is a qualified follower of Lord Chaitanya. And for example, Krishnadas Kaviraj, who wrote the Chaitanya Charitamrita, studied from Raghunath Das Goswami and other Goswamis. That's how he knew about the life of Lord Chaitanya. He was an old man who never met Lord Chaitanya, but he heard about him from his followers, and he became very, very exalted devotee on that basis. So it's important to differentiate between the line of Diksha, who gives initiation to someone else, and the line of Shiksha, who gives instruction. So anybody who's taking this course is taking Shiksha from Rupa Goswami. We're all being instructed by the author of the Nectar of Instruction. He's instructing us. He is our instructing guru. Srila Prabhupada is also our instructing guru. To an extent, I'm also functioning as a servant in that regard. And none of us here have taken initiation from any of those persons. But the line of the initiating lines continue. So that's like parallel. But the essential thing is actually instruction, because Diksha follows Shiksha. You don't take meaningful initiation unless and until you've received the instruction and imbibed it and tried to apply it. So yeah, they did have disciples, and some of the disciples are still on the planet now in terms of Diksha. And everyone in the Krishna consciousness movement is a Shiksha disciple of Rupa Goswami. That's what Rupanuga means, followers of Rupa. So we're all doing that right now. And that's our pleasure and joy. And Julia in the chat, when we discuss attitude, does this also connect to how we relate to Krishna, i.e. parent, child, friend, partner? Yes, it does. But in my estimation, when Prabhupada's talking about advancement of Krishna consciousness, he's not talking about because when you talk about, loving Krishna in the mood of a parent or a friend, that's not at the level of practice. That's at the level of perfection. That's for somebody who's already at the level of prema and has realized their relationship with Krishna. And so, yeah, there's variation in that, but they're not really advancing in Krishna consciousness. So based on the context of Prabhupada's statement, he's talking here about progressing. So he's talking about like how we align ourselves in the day-to-day. So if you look at the next sentence after he says, advancement is dependent on your attitude, he says, a follower of the Krishna consciousness movement should become a perfect Goswami. Go means the senses, and Swami means the master. One who wants to become a perfect devotee of Krishna must become a Goswami. So this is his encouragement. This is his instruction here. Our attitude begins with controlling the senses. He already said that actually pretty much verbatim. So the context here isn't so much like attitude depends on how you love Krishna. Yes, or advancement depends on how you love Krishna, but it's what you do about that love. Like, we gave this example in the Bhagavad Gita course. If I say, honey, I really love you, so I almost cooked dinner for you, it's only worth so much. It's devotional service. It's what you do to serve, to reflect your devotion. It's how you act. That's the expression of your feeling. So we receive the capacity to love Krishna deeper and deeper, and we try to express that to him however we can. And the sincere attempt to do so is our attitude. So that's like what Prabhupada's talking about, the attempt to try to control our senses, the attempt to read and study this book, showing up, listen to the recording. These are all sincere attempts to demonstrate our attitude. So I would say that's more of what Prabhupada's talking about. And in time, as our love for Krishna deepens, becomes pure by virtue of our attitude, then we relate to Krishna in specific ways, and that's given in one of Rupa Goswami's other books, The Nectar of Devotion, the different rasas or moods of loving and serving Krishna. Does that answer your question? Awesome.
Can I ask that in another way
Mhm.
to see if my brain is thinking about it? It makes me think of intention and impact. So would you say like it's a metaphor or a simile to say attitude is impact and advancement, or no, I'm sorry, attitude is intention and advancement is impact?
Yeah, I would say that. So we understand that in bhakti, there are two things. There's our endeavor, and there's Krishna's mercy. And of the two, which one is more powerful?
Gracious mercy.
Krishna's mercy. Good guess. You're correct. It turns out Krishna's a lot more powerful than we are, as you would expect. However, there's still two things. He doesn't take the place of our free will, because then it wouldn't be a relationship anymore. It'd be slavery or some weird robotic, it's not actually real. So our attitude, our application of what we do, or what we're trying to do, is like always important. The effect it has is variable. Just like Arjuna, he didn't know what's going to happen if he goes to war, but he knew by the end of Bhagavad Gita, this is what I have to do because it's right, because it's my duty to Krishna in this situation. I trust him. Ultimately, I know he's doing what's best for me. I know he's looking out for me. He's saying, do this and I'll be okay. I'll just do it. He didn't know how the war was going to go. He didn't, that's not for him to know. Krishna even said, your duty is to do your duty. It's not for you to try to figure out and enjoy the results for yourself. That's way back in chapter 2. And by the end, Arjuna's like, got it. I'm on board. So it's surrender in action. And yeah, the results are up to him. But based on those results, we reapply and we recenter ourselves based on how we get feedback from our internal and external gurus, our environment, and so forth. It's very dynamic. It doesn't just happen once. You don't just sign on the dotted line. I'm saved. I'm good. I believe in this. Every day you got to refresh. And not just you get to. That's what makes it alive. Can you imagine a relationship where you don't like refresh every day? It's like you loved them once. Is that good enough? Not really. So similarly, we get to refresh every day. Right. So Prabhupada stresses in the preface here that one has to control their senses and mind. That's the beginning. And the reason he does that, we'll get to in the first verse. Okay. I'll share the Sanskrit here. This is beautiful. Vacho vegam manasakrota vegam jihva vegam udaropastha vegam etan vegan yuvashaheta tira sarvam api mam prativing sashusyat. So the one word that happens over and over again is vega. Vega. Vega means urge. Vega means urge. Which is funny because if you think about it, that means Las Vegas means the urges. Las is Spanish for the, plural. The urges. Welcome to the urges. Vega. And the verse is saying, a sober person who can tolerate the urge to speak, the mind's demands, the actions of anger, and the urges of the tongue, belly, and genitals, is qualified to make disciples all over the world. Right? So 6 things. Vacha, the first word in the Nectar of Instruction is vacha. Vacha. What does that sound like to you? Given that the word actually means speech. What does that sound like? Vacha. Voice. Vocal. Little hint for the Sanskrit enthusiasts. It's the root of the words for voice. Vocal. Vox is the Latin from vacha, voice. That's the first word. It's the first step in Krishna consciousness. It's the first step in trying to, when one asks the question, how can I practice bhakti? This is the first thing we hear. Speech, your words. So in our movement, as we heard throughout Bhagavad Gita, the processes of bhakti, the primary ones are hearing and chanting. This is like how things work. And the whole Bhagavad Gita is a conversation in which Arjuna is hearing, but he's also like reflecting and then asking back and then hearing some more. And it's this back and forth. So this hearing and chanting is central. And so, as it is in many places, Rupa Goswami is highlighting for us our power. We actually have a tremendous amount of power through what we choose to say. And so the question of how do I practice bhakti? How do I like do it in the best way? It begins with this. Tolerate the urge to speak. So Prabhupada talks about this in the purport. Well, he begins the purport with a reference to controlling the senses. He refers to a section in the Srimad Bhagavatam where the hero of Srimad Bhagavatam, Parikshit Maharaj, he asks the question of Sukadeva, who's speaking the Bhagavatam. He says, why do people undergo atonement for their mistakes if they can't control their senses? Right? Like, in other words, as Prabhupada says, if somebody sees that like, thievery is going to be punishable, it's morally wrong, it's legally wrong, there's consequences for it, why do they still do that? Like, why does that happen? Right? And in that section, what comes out is that it's not enough to know something. It's not enough to just believe it and be convinced by it. That doesn't really change the capacity we have to make a bad decision anyway, Like, that happens all the time. People know that it's not in their best interest, but they do it anyway. Like, they know it's like all the like social and legal consequences are there. Even the inner guru is like, no, don't do that. It's really not good for you. But we do it anyway. Like, this is and Arjuna talks about this in chapter 3, like, why is it that we're impelled practically against our will to do things? So Prabhupada goes over this and he talks about different levels of learners. The first class person hears about something and they apply it in their life. Second class is they hear about it, then they see someone else as an example of it, then they apply it in their life. Third class is they have to actually try it themselves. Then they learn. They make the mistake. Actually have to stick their hand in the fire. I remember when I was a child, I actually went against the emphatic instructions of my mom and stuck a fork in an electrical socket. I did it just to see what would happen. I didn't do it a second time. I can say that much about myself. I only did it once. But the point is, Parikshit's question is really relevant because things like jail or social consequences or whatever, they're there to prevent people from doing things or doing things again. But people still make mistakes over and over again, things that are not in their best interest. So what's the point? How do you break that cycle? And the answer is that you have to have the higher taste. Krishna talked about this in the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita. If you don't have a higher alternative, if your heart doesn't become purified, you'll be drawn to inferior options, right? In that section of the conversation between Shukadeva and Parikshit, Parikshit says, what's the point in all this atonement? It's like an elephant's bath. You see an elephant, they go in the water. You may have seen this on the National Geographic. They go in the water, clean themselves, then they get out, slap some mud all over themselves, and they're dirty again. Of course, I mean, biologically speaking, it serves a purpose. It keeps their body cool, but they're dirty. It's like somebody going to a confessional and saying, okay, I made this mistake. And they get purified through some penance and apology and sincere introspection, and they go do it again. Or they go to jail, or there's some social price or consequence, and they just do it again. And Parikshit's like, what's the point of such a system? Why would this be the case? And the answer is that that's not sufficient. Atonement isn't the point. The point is, well, let's hear from Prabhupada. A sinful activity cannot be counteracted by a pious activity. Thus, real prayaschitta, atonement, is the awakening of our dormant Krishna consciousness. Real atonement involves coming to real knowledge. And for that, there is a standard process. When one follows a regulated hygienic process, they do not fall sick. A human being is meant to be trained according to certain principles to revive their original consciousness. Such a methodical life is described as tapasya. So in this purport, in the next couple classes, we're going to get into tapasya, or like voluntarily accepting something that doesn't feel good temporarily for benefit later. You may remember from the 18th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, this is what I love about dealing with, talking to students who've already read Bhagavad Gita. All these principles are already there. Krishna gave to us happiness in the modes of nature. Happiness in goodness, pleasure and goodness, feels like poison at the beginning. Doesn't feel good, but feels great later. But the one in the mode of passion feels like a great idea right away, but it's terrible for you later. It's like when you come back home from Halloween, you're like, Mom, I want to have all this candy right now. This is the best idea I ever had. It seems like a fantastic idea. You'll feel awful the next day. That's a mode of passion urge. Mode of goodness is like, no, you can't do that. You can have one right now. And you're like, oh my God, this is the worst. I want to have all of it. Why are you doing this to me? But it's actually so much better because you can enjoy that for days and days, one a day, or whatever your regulated process is, right? It doesn't feel like a good idea, but it actually is a great idea. So Krishna talked about it there. This is what Prabhupada is referring to as tapasya. Tapasya is translated as austerity, regulation. The word tapas actually comes from the word for heat, like friction. You have to like create some rubbing, some discomfort, like bump up against something to get some heat. But tapasya for us as devotees isn't just like making our lives difficult, as if that's the point of, that's not the point of life. Life is difficult enough anyway. The point is to hear about what voluntary choices we can take that may not feel great right away, but will help us in the long term. And one of the easiest examples I can think of is waking up like early. What early is different for different people, but most people kind of understand, like they have this experience of like, you wake up in the morning, even the night before, you're like, I'm going to wake up at X o'clock. I know I haven't, that's enough sleep for me. I know that I figured out like biologically, that's all I need. And then if I do that, I have my whole day ahead of me. I get more done in the morning. I feel better. I get my rounds are good. I can chant Hare Krishna. My work and my relationships are better. Then the alarm comes. You have it all set. The alarm comes, and you're like, oh, but I really want to snooze. I really want to just go back to sleep for like, just give me 5 more minutes, But it's not just 5 more minutes. Like that part of your mind is like, no, don't do this to me. Do anything but this, right? Starts pleading and bargaining. Tapasya is like, no, I'm rolling out of bed. I know it's colder out there than it is in here. It's going to suck for a second, but it's actually a really good idea. And that's an authorized austerity. That's a recommended way of controlling one's senses. We don't torture the body. We don't invent austerities in this movement. This is a point that's going to come up again and again. We do want to control the senses. We need to control the senses in order to make advancement. However, the ways to do that are given to us in general. And somebody who is experienced in bhakti can also help you to specifically apply it in your situation. So sometimes we find with practitioners in Krishna consciousness, when one becomes convinced that, oh wow, bhakti is actually like amazing and it's totally it for me. Like I want to practice bhakti, and this is actually real wisdom, and I want to do this, and this is like what life is all about. I want to go to Krishna. Sometimes you have this beginner's enthusiasm where it's like, yeah, I want to control my senses, and so I'm going to do XYZ. And it's not anything anyone recommended for you. Prabhupada didn't say it, or if he did, you took it out of context. It's not really for you. And so there's this principle we'll come back to over and over again of regulated, authorized tapasya, how to actually perform that. So again, back to the first word, vacha, speech, what we do with our words. Just as an idea, just as a beginning point, we're going to start by saying, what you let come out of your mouth is super potent and super powerful, and is actually something we have a lot of choice over. We actually can say that. If we're honest with ourselves, we can decide that, actually, I decide what comes out of my mouth. No one else decides it for me. And therefore, I'm responsible for that. And as we'll get into next week, the consequences and the power of speech. So I think that's it for today. I think that's enough. We got one word into the Nectar of Instruction. And we talked about Rupa Goswami and the preface, and attitude is dependent on the advancement is dependent on the attitude of the practitioner. Just to get one word, and already we're like, that's good. That's an hour. Let me chew on that. So we'll take any reflections now live, at least a couple of reflections. And what I'll ask is, before next week, for those live and also listen to the recording, write one thing that stood out from this class that you heard in the WhatsApp. And also, my application question is tapasya, austerity, regulated austerity. What example can you find in your life of an austerity that you received as a regulated, like ordained, appropriate one that you tried to apply and got results? Whether you were perfect in applying it or not isn't necessary. Just one, even just one thing. You can say more than one. You could say, I failed at this one, succeeded at that one. But at least one thing where you received from Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada, Krishna, in some way or another, a devotee, one way of regulating your life as a human being that you try to apply, and you started to see some results. And that'll start our conversation around tapas, regulated, voluntary suffering in the short term for happiness in the long term. Hare Krishna. All right. Thanks, everyone. Now let's take some reflections. What stood out from today?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that I understood the example of the Parikshit Maharaj. Because I think you broke it out into 3 different things, where there's the examples of, there's the one person who hears and applies.
Right.
There's the second, which hears it, they see someone else do it, and then they apply it. And then the third one is they hear it, but they have to experience it,
Yeah.
and then apply it. Like, is that kind of the order at which some people may approach hearing something?
Yeah. Ideally, you learn from those who have wisdom and have already learned. And if you can accept and imbibe that knowledge and wisdom, it saves a lot of trouble. That's kind of the point of having education systems, is that there's a group of people who agree that they have room to learn, and a group of people who agree that they're willing, and other people agree that they're also able, they're like authorized to share knowledge, and they get together. And with that combined attitude of, I'm here to learn and receive, and I'm here to share and help, there's advancement made. For everybody, actually. The teacher makes advancement too. But so when you hear and you receive it and you apply that on the basis, like, I'm convinced, that's perfect. That's actually perfect. It saves a lot of time and trouble if you can do that. But not everyone can at any given time do that. Sometimes you have to learn from other people's experience, which means you become an observer of the world. And that's good too. It takes a little more time because you have to look around and see, okay, yeah, you know what? I heard that was a bad idea. And I see, like, my buddy Joe over there tried it, and it really didn't work out for them. Okay, I get it. I'm convinced. And then there's Joe. Joe heard about it, and his brother Bill tried it. It wasn't a good idea, but Joe thought, I'm going to try myself. And they stuck their fork in the electrical socket. And they learned for themselves the hard way. And so that's even more painful. And there's more consequences, but you could still learn that way. So that's what Prabhupada's talking about, is that how we learn.
I like the example, I've heard the example given of that too, of like someone tells you, don't put your hand on the burner because you'll burn your hand. And the first class is like, okay, then you don't do it because somebody who knows told you, right? It's like, or practice these 4 regulative principles, and then you like trust this person, you know, they have wisdom, and then you do it, right? And then second is you watch someone else put their hand on the burner and you see that they got burned. So then you know not to do it. A second class. Third class is like, you were told, don't put your hand on the burner, it'll burn your hand. But you're like, well, maybe my hand won't burn. Maybe I actually can find the way around my hand burning, and then you do it. And then you get burned. You're like, okay, now I'm going to do it. Right?
Yeah.
And either way, like you just said, you're learning it, but one is just a more painful route.
And realistically, you know, like I said at the beginning, flying a plane or driving a car means constantly coming back to center. So that means you're going off course. That's what coming back to center means. Either because of you, or because of the road, or distraction, or the wind, or whatever. There's some forces around there that cause you to always have to come back to center. So we're going to also bring this up over and over again. This is not a place for shaming anybody, especially ourselves, around how we have like to keep learning the same lessons over and over again. That's why the whole world has been created, for us to learn these lessons. Krishna is facilitating that. This is not a place for shame. It's not a place for like blame and shame, or like ranking. Oh, I'm better than them because I just had to hear it. Like, they had to learn that way. It's like, that's not bhakti. It's not bhakti. And we're gonna go into that more later, like the reapplication of things we've already learned, like how to integrate repeated lessons. But yeah, that's a starting point. Those are different levels of consciousness. You know.
I also have a reflection, but if someone else wants to share.
Sure.
That was a question.
I had a question. One of the things that I appreciated about the Bhagavad Gita was there was that section in the beginning that really kind of set the stage, like sort of like historical grounding for what was going on at that time. And I'm wondering if there's a resource that would maybe help do the same for this book. I mean, we touched on it really briefly at the beginning about the 6 Goswamis, but like 15th century, like what was the lay of the land? And again, it's probably too much to answer here, but it just would help me understand how this book fits into the time. Right.
I would say that in general, what we're dealing with at that time and place is not a whole lot different than what we're dealing with today, but if anything, was more pious and regulated and spiritually oriented than it is now. So if anything, the message of Nectar of Instruction is even more urgent now. 15th century Bengal and India in general was a place where the spiritual gifts of India had been neglected by and large, and were in the hands of people, at best, they were in the hands of people who were like inherited the title of Brahmins or spiritually elevated people. They weren't necessarily qualified for those posts. It was very much a place where the conclusion among the educated and literate and kind of like academics of the time was that the literature's point for us was to become perfect philosophers, knowers of truth, jnanis, controllers of the senses through understanding that we're not our bodies and moving away from that. However, India was also a place, as we can see even more in the world today, 500 years later, where that is not a practical path for most people to follow. And in the day-to-day, people are really dealing with their senses There's no question of renouncing everything and living on a mountain somewhere, celibate, alone, in like frigid water in the winter, like doing these absurd, kind of things to like realize you're not your body. Practically, what people are dealing with is like the day-to-day of how to actually meet their material needs, and their own material desires were pretty much unchecked. So religion and spirituality at the time was more or less used as a prop. In fact, it was written about by the contemporaries of Lord Chaitanya that the spirituality of the time was really like, how do I be pious enough for my kids to have like a good partner and get married and be happy and healthy? How do I be like prosperity gospel, you could say, in the kind of like vocabulary of our time, prosperity gospel, like how to like be nice to God so you get what you want. That's the extent of how spirituality was applied. So I don't think any of that is very different than today. If anything, it was better then. It was more pious. They were better examples. There was less distraction. However, yeah, those are some of that's some of the context. Because this is Sanatan Dharma, it's the eternal, it's about the eternal nature of the soul. There's not really much of a shift. It's always relevant for us. But what you'll find with this book is that it doesn't really deal with cultural things. I don't think you can say anything. This book is an artifact of Indian culture or Bengal, or a reaction to the time and place. It's all eternally relevant. Like whether you lived 6,000 years ago or 6,000 years from now, in any kind of human body, in any kind of situation, regulating how you speak is a really powerful way to determine your destination in life. So that's why it's called a Nectar of Instruction. It's condensed down. If you look at like what it's condensed down from, there are some statements that are more contextual to like, this only works in a society with Brahmins and all these different moving pieces that were there in India 500 years ago. This only works if you speak Sanskrit. This only works if you were initiated in the Vedic system. This only works if you worship the deity. That's not in the Nectar of Instruction. It's boiled down to 11 verses. So it's super relevant for everyone all the time. And it's the kind of stuff you can't do without. Some things you could do without. Like you could take some things out of something and it stays the same. But there's always that point at which if you take something, this one thing out, it's not the same anymore. Like if water is not wet, it's not water. It's ice or water vapor or solid, but it ain't water. It's got to be wet. So that's its natural essential quality. So bhakti, the religion of the soul, who we are, depends on these essential things. These are always found in one who has bhakti. Whether they're a Christian with bhakti, an agnostic with bhakti, a Hare Krishna with bhakti, you'll always find certain qualities. You'll always find certain things. This is about the soul. It's not about India. Which is really good news for us. Otherwise, we'd have to keep adjusting, So the goals are always the same. What's different is where we are. Everybody in this class has a different position in relationship to, the goal of Krishna consciousness, because we're all individuals. In fact, we're all different every day. So that's where the adjustment and like, the work and like the challenges come into it, and opportunities come into it is on our part, because we're such dynamic units of consciousness. But the goal is the same for everybody. That's not any different. But we're going to get into like how to apply it for our specific lives, and that's where it gets really interesting and relevant and varies, by person. Good for now? Awesome. Tanya.
So it's good to see you.
You too.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. We're all born with our, innate temperaments, right? And, these three personality traits or learning traits that we were just talking about, I think that has a lot to do with taking your innate temperament and then applying a relationship, if you have one or not, and trust, right? So those that were in the first order, or whatever you called it, I forget how you worded it, but those that just learn by being told once and they're good, they believe it 100%, they'll never do it. That's somebody that can trust that relationship innately without without concern or question, right? And then going down the path, it's, that one in the middle is like, okay, I'll trust it if somebody I trust trusts it, right? Or I see them go through that. And then that third one is I
Right.
have to feel the pain myself. And
Yeah, I
it's
trust
very
my
similar.
senses. If I can
What's that?
feel it, I trust my senses. If I can feel it, then I
Right.
know it's real.
Right. And it's very similar. Just an analogy I was coming to mind is, with parenting, right? I have 3 kids. They're all different. And I've gotten into, discussions with other mothers about, how to parent certain types of kids. And I remember a discussion where I said, somebody challenged that I was really tough on my kids when they were little. And, I put an analogy on there and I said, well, one child might need just a white picket fence, and that's enough. They'll stay in the yard, and then another child might need, a chain link fence with razor wire to stay in the yard. And then my sons who had ADHD needed a cattle chute to stay in their lane, right? So it's just interesting that whole concept of learning, I think, has a lot to do with your temperament and your ability to create that relationship with trust.
Yeah, it's a very subtle thing that can't be faked. So like relationship is always a very dynamic thing. That's why that statement that advancement depends in bhakti depends on the attitude of the follower is such a deep statement, because one of the aspects that comes out is that our attitude is not just our attitude to our practice. It's not like a neutral thing of like, how do I approach my chanting? It's how do I approach my teachers? How do I approach Krishna's message? What is my attitude to the fellow devotees? Am I grateful to see them? Am I like receiving the wisdom from am I looking at the world and receiving wisdom from my environment? Or am I like coasting through it with blinders on? It's all very much about relationship. It's like all about where my faith actually resides. Do I have such faith in my own senses that I insist on experiencing things for myself before I'm convinced, And there's like room to realize that and start to work on, on that thing. So yeah, it's very subtle. Trust is a very subtle thing, and you can fake it for some time. But my whole attitude, as we've seen in Bhagavad Gita, is like this is not about blindly believing something. It's about actually becoming convinced and having organic, natural trust in the process by applying it in our lives. Mm-hmm. And that's also first class, because the process says you should apply it in your life. You try to do that, and then you take that new trust back to the message itself. And this way, theory and practice continue to build into each other.
Thank you.
Jai. Thank you. Any more reflections?
I can share it in the WhatsApp group.
Sure. Okie dokie. All right. Well, I think we'll end for today, for this week. Thank you all so much. Can we sing Happy Birthday to Leanne? We must sing Happy Birthday to Leanne. And she has to receive it. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Bhakti Leanne. Happy birthday to you. This is the price you pay for having a birthday on Tuesdays this year. May you grow in bhakti and always give us the gift of your association. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So yeah, reflections in WhatsApp and one application of the principle of regulated austerity that you've applied in your life and how it helped you. Hare Krishna. See you next time, next week at the same time. Thank you so much. Haribol.
Haribol.